in, and I think that can be dangerous because you might. You're gonna let me pin myself here. I'm angry with the speaker. It's annoying. So yesterday, 7th hour, I was teaching, and it was 3:11, and I thought I had 4 minutes left to teach, and they cut in at 3:11, and that made me mad. Okay, so yesterday I gave you guys some homework. The John Locke Second Treatise on Civil Government is due Friday. Okay? I've had a few people turn it in already, and I've got some really good responses on that. Actually, pretty impressed with some of them, so that's great. You're using your brain to read something that is written in Old English, which, you know, I think is great for you. And then I asked you guys to read Hobbes, Locke, and Rousseau for today, and we will get to that in just a moment, okay? Before we get there, in the notes, write notes here, we had talked about the 4 characteristics of a state. Yes, hi. Just put it into Canvas in that assignment. Yeah, you can just text it in and write it in there. I think most of the time, guys, if you want to work outside of Canvas, you can just open a Word document on your own computer, do the work, copy it, and paste it into Canvas. If you don't want to work in Canvas. Does that make sense? Okay, and everybody's able to find what I posted. I tried to do good instructions on that, where I need you to read for today, but the assignment's due Friday. Okay, I am not going to do this thing where green people have it due on Thursday, gold. It's going to be the same for everybody. That's too confusing for me. And probably, you know, for you, I don't know. I'm not even going to mess with that, okay? So I talked about the 4 origins, or the 4 characteristics of a state, okay? But the next thing I got to do to build up to this social contract is talk about other origins of a state, okay? So we're going to go way back in world history and look at different origins of a state, which we know has 4 characteristics: people, right? Territory. It's got sovereignty and a government. Yes? Okay, so there are 4 origins of the state. So that's your new header, is 4 origins of a state. If you're taking notes, which you should be. Okay, the first one is the force theory. I need to take it down. I just keep forgetting. Okay, so think of, you guys have heard of Attila the Hun? Genghis Khan? Okay, you heard of the Vikings? You guys watch the Vikings show on Netflix or Amazon? Okay, it's pretty good. I've watched like 4 seasons, maybe 5. It's pretty good. Anyhow, what do those people do? They conquer other people, yes? And they force them to live, okay? So force theory is when one person or a group of people force people in an area to submit to their power. Okay, that's the force theory, where one person, or like Attila the Hun, Genghis Khan, forced people in an area to submit to their power. Okay, and so states were sometimes born like that. And you can look out throughout human history where we've seen that. Okay, you can kind of see it in the New World, like when Spanish explorers came over, right? And they went down to Central America, what's today Mexico, and they forced people to submit to their power, to their will. Okay, So that's one way a state is formed. Okay. And the second way is the evolutionary theory. Or in other words, it evolves. Okay. So you start with a family. Family grows into a clan. The clan grows into a tribe. Now, when we think of tribes, a lot of times, from our view, we see tribes as being nomadic, as moving around, hunter-gatherers and that sort of thing. But when tribes settle in a certain area, throughout history, they have formed states. Okay, so it's just it grows out of a family to a clan to a tribe, and then they settle. No longer nomadic, right? So they live off that land and create a state. Okay. The third one you're all very familiar with, and that's the divine right theory. To define the divine right theory, we would say that God gave people the divine right to rule. God gave people the divine right to rule over others, over a kingdom, if you will. Okay, so this is in the era of kings and queens and dynasties in China and empires in Japan, the emperor, and different time periods where people claim that God gave them the power to rule over others and their kingdom. Okay, so you guys, there's dozens and dozens of examples of this. Name a king, they usually claim divine right. Now, in our Bible, was there ever a time where there was actually truly where God chose a king to rule over others? When they requested it, right? Who were those two kings? David and Saul. Okay, so really the divine right theory does have some historical truth to it, okay, in the sense that God provided these kings. Okay, but when we talk about Queen Elizabeth or King Henry VIII or Louis XIV of France, did God really give them the divine right to rule? No. Okay, but they claimed it, and they used that to basically do whatever they wanted. Okay, and that's a lot of history, especially European history, yes, that we come from. Okay, so when we get to the fourth origin of a state, of course, that is the social contract theory. Okay, and that takes us to our reading from last night. Okay, and the different philosophers that wrote about the social contract theory. Okay, so to define a social contract, we're to say that government is an agreement between people. Government is an agreement between people and government. So this is where we break down Hobbes, Locke, and Rousseau. Okay, so we're going to start with Hobbes. Now, prior to this assignment, how many of you guys remember learning about these people in an earlier time? I know Mr. Swords talks about them. How much do you remember? I don't know. Okay, but this would definitely give you a good refresher. Yes. Okay. Now look at the time when Hobbes is writing. He's born in 1588, so he's writing in the 17th century, living under a divine right ruler in England. Yes, he's English. Okay, so if you remember some of this history, and I know your senior English class is what? English Lit, right? Okay, so some of this will be in common with, I usually like teaching on the door. There's way too much noise over there. Okay. A lot of crossover with your English classes. Now, have you guys started doing any of that yet? English Lit? I mean, okay. No, Barber does a really good job. He kind of follows along with what I talk about here, okay? So Hobbes wrote several books or several theories, philosophies, okay? Now, there's one in there they mention, his best known work is the Leviathan, okay? Have you heard of that word before, the Leviathan? Where have you heard of that? Where can you find that? Yeah. It's a what? Mythological creature, but where did we read about it? Yeah. It's in the Bible. Okay? Like a sea monster. A mythological sea monster. Okay. Now, big sea monsters, or monsters that are big like this, generally consume. Okay? They have dominion over the sea. Okay? Hobbes is talking about this in a political sense. Okay? That the Leviathan is government. And the government has dominion over the people. And since it's a sea monster, it's a cruel government. Yes? Okay? Now, Hobbes obviously believes this is necessary, right? Why does Hobbes feel it's necessary to have a strong Leviathan-type government? Is that at hand? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Because people are evil. People are evil. Are people are selfish? They're selfish. Self-interested. Now, Cindy was telling me during house how much she really liked Hobbes. No, I'm kidding. She said, I don't like him. Okay. Now, there's some really interesting stuff in here when we look at his theory on human nature, because all three of these men, this is the study of mankind, right? Of humans and how they view humans. And based on how you view humans, you set up a social contract, right? Okay. So he said that life, if we left to ourselves, would be nasty, brutish, and short, right? Okay. Now, I hope that's not the case for you guys. I hope that your lives are not nasty, brutish, and short. Okay. So we're going to try and create government to prevent that. Okay. Now, a couple of things. Hobbes believes people are subjective. Yeah. Now, I know in religion class, you guys have learned about objective truth and subjective truth. Yes? Okay. Now, I don't know how much you're into religion class or not. Some of you are probably really into it. Some of you may not be. Okay. But this is so important to society that we live in, is what is truth. Okay. And in Hobbes' eyes, people being subjective means what? Okay, or we make our own truth. Yes? Okay. So if we're selfish, okay, so my truth could be that you have something that I want, and I can take it from you by force. And that's okay. Because in my truth, that's all right. Yes? Okay, so you can definitely see how life could be nasty, brutish, and short if people were all subjective. Today we call this what? Moral what? You could say subjectivism, or in a more layman's term, moral relativism. Heard that? Okay. So we get to decide what is right and wrong. Okay. There is no objective truth. Okay. I like this part in here where he talks about adults care for children because they have a strong sense of obligation to preserve the race and are benefited by the ability to work and desire to have someone take care of them when they get old. Now, do you believe this is why your parents had children? Maybe some of you, I don't know. It's not why I had kids. Now, think about you German folk. We have some German folk here, okay? You German folk whose ancestors immigrated out here to Kansas in the, 19th century, okay, 1800s, and started farming. Did you need to have kids? I mean, you kind of needed to have kids. Why? To work on the farm, to do the chores, to milk the cows, plow the fields, right? So in a sense, I mean, as history changes or as lifestyles change, now we have a lot of people that don't have kids, right? I don't know if I told you this. I have one sister. She has no kids. My wife has one brother. They have no kids. And they're both older than us. They won't have kids. Okay, I have a half-sister. She has 3. Okay? But really, my 2 children are the only, grandchildren of, So, times have changed. But that's an interesting view on life that Hobbes has here. But he also says that we know they're selfish, right? People are selfish, self-interested, okay, evil, but they're irrational. Now they use an E. Okay, but it's rational. Okay. So, because people are self-interested, they want to survive. Okay? They don't want to live in a nasty, cruel, brutish, short life. So because of this rationality, they agree to form a government. Okay? It is a choice to form a government, a social contract, to protect us from each other. Okay? Where we will have a safe and secure society. Okay? So, guys, the reason why we still talk about Hobbes is there are many reasons, okay? Because I am going to refer back to this when we talk about Locke, okay? Because we have a changing society today, and for that reason, Hobbes needs to be revisited, okay? Now, he did feel that a monarch, right, was the best form of social contract to have. Now, not necessarily a divine right king, but a dictator, an autocrat, okay? Because people don't know how to behave. So you need somebody with a lot of power. You need a Leviathan. Does that make sense? Okay. It's a pessimistic view of human nature with an all-controlling government that controls that human nature. Okay? Good? Pretty good understanding there, Hobbes? Okay. Oh, by the way, on the test, I will be asking you to compare and contrast Hobbes and Locke's theory on social contract. Okay? So you have everything you need right here. Okay? And these are a few of the highlights that I might be looking for when I'm grading. That make sense? Yeah. All right. Let's move on to John Locke. Now he's writing a little bit later. Oh, by the way, can Hobbes get himself in trouble by proclaiming that a monarch is fine, but it doesn't necessarily have to be divine right? Yeah, I mean, he can get himself in trouble. But not as much trouble as Locke can get himself in. Okay. So Locke, born about 50 years later than Hobbes, studied at Oxford, Okay, so a couple of his major works, essay on concerning human understanding, okay? He argued in his book that all knowledge was founded and ultimately derived from senses. He also wrote the 2 treatises on civil government, which some of you read already, which outline liberal ideas about government. Okay. We just did this whole thing on liberal versus conservative, right? Sorry for the bad abbreviation there. Guys, all of the founders were classical liberals. Okay? The root of the word liberty, or liberty. Okay? They were classical liberals. Okay? That share not a lot in common with 2020 politics in America when we say liberals. Now, remember when I did the pocketbook versus the bedroom issues? Okay, so today's liberals are classical liberals when it comes to bedroom issues. Okay, freedom. Okay, but on economic issues, not so much. You're following me. So it's not really fair to compare classical liberalism with modern liberalism. Okay. But it's important to know that term classical liberalism, just for the knowledge that our founders were fighting for liberty, okay, for freedom. All right. The second treatise was originally written in 1680, but was considered too radical to be published, so he waited for 10 years to publish that out of fear for his life. He was committing nothing short of treason by writing this. Okay? Now, he's going to have a profound impact on the formation of the United States of America. Okay? Well, he believed in a more optimistic view. Okay? So you have human nature, which all three are going to talk about, but also a state of nature. And this is mentioned time and time again in his writing. Okay, state of nature and natural law. So when you're trying to wrap your head around what this means, state of nature. One way I like to look at this, guys, is think of the jungle. Right? The jungle has its natural ways. It's got, who's the king of the jungle? The lion, right? There's kind of a pecking order, okay? And each one kind of relies on the other for survival and so forth, okay? A natural environment, okay? Now, who created the state of nature? God. Okay, if you believe in God, then God created the state of nature. All right, so when we talk about things like natural rights, natural law, who created that? God. Okay, so this Hobbes is a Christian. Okay, and he is going to use the Bible and his knowledge of Christianity when writing this political philosophy. Okay, so when we look at this, he believes that people are not subjective creatures, but rather there is objective truth. Okay. Now, if you look up the definition of truth in the Merriam-Webster dictionary, or the Oxford Dictionary, it's going to say something like, truth is what we see or what we can rationalize. Okay? But in the view of Christian orthodoxy, what is truth? A few years ago, now I told you guys I'm a Protestant, right? Okay. So a few years ago, my wife and I, our church, did this thing called the Truth Project. It's a series of DVDs, really about the history of Christianity, belief in Judeo-Christian heritage and beliefs. Okay. So to me, as a Protestant, if you were to ask me, what is truth? I'll give you a very simple answer. God is truth. Okay, so what is inspired by God, what comes from God is truth. Okay, and I would venture to say that Catholics pretty much believe the same thing. Okay, I don't want to step on anybody's toes here or tell you what you think, because I'm not, I mean, I know a lot, but I'm not an expert. Okay, so objective truth means there is good and there is evil. There is right and there is wrong. That does exist naturally under God's law. Okay? And when you read the Ten Commandments, they give you quite a bit there, but it goes beyond that. Okay? So based on what you read about Hobbes, does he feel that man is created good or evil? What do you guys think? Do you think we are good or evil when we are born? We certainly have the capacity for evil, do we not? Does that make us evil? Or are we naturally good? Naturally good, but the stain, yes. Jay, got a visitor. Okay, so we are naturally good, but have the stain of sin on us, right? That goes back to Adam and Eve, right? Okay, so he felt, and this is just great stuff. Therefore, morality stems from, which is inherent in all people, stems from natural law, which is inherent in all people and prevents them from harming others. Locke argued that the state of nature was the perfect liberty to do what is best, not whatever you wanted. Okay? So, if we all act out or live the lives as true Christians, society will be good. Okay? But we don't. We're all sinners. Yes? Okay. So, the state of nature, although the state where there's no government, okay, the state of nature, although a state where there is no government to punish people, is not a state without morality. The state of nature is pre-political, but not pre-moral. So morality comes before anything else. We are born with it. Okay? Now, what's that thing we call that tells us when we're doing something wrong? Your conscience. Okay, where does that come from? Is there a part in the brain that's your conscience? There's not. You can't point to the whatever it's called in the brain stem. What's that? Hypothalamus. You can't point to that. You can't point to the frontal cortex and say that's where your conscience is. Right? Who gave us that? Wasn't that given to us? Again, the answer to all these questions, most of them is God. Okay? All right, so we're pre-moral. Okay? Locke doesn't think like this. Unfortunately, since there is no government, people still might steal or otherwise harm one another enough to start a war between two of their families. Most notably, Locke is concerned with people stealing and fighting over what? Private property, which he defined as being created whenever someone mixed their labor with the natural resources of Earth. Now, you see this side note, right? Locke concluded it was okay for Europeans to take land from Native Americans because they were nomadic. They did not utilize the raw materials of land, therefore it was not their property. Okay. What they're watching. So, what to add here? Okay. In his second treatise, he talks about natural rights, and among these are life, liberty, and property. Okay? In that bottom paragraph, he goes on to say, government is formed when individuals agree to leave a state of nature and give their power to a public government that can stop these attacks against the laws of nature, against what is good and right. Having joined in a social contract with other members of society, they gain laws to protect themselves and their property, as well as the power to enforce those laws. Then the people have every right, if not an outright obligation, to overthrow that government and create a new social contract that will protect them. So what Locke is saying, guys, is that the role of government is to secure your natural rights. That is the role of government. He also says that government's legitimacy comes from the people, not God. This is the social contract. Government is legitimate because we allow government to rule over us. God isn't given that power from God. Government is not given that power from God, divine right. This is the treason that Locke is committing. Now I'm going to stay on Locke for a while. Okay. Then we got here, third, fifth, what? Second, 25. All right. So, as I told you guys, well, my wife is a cradle Methodist. She was born in a Methodist family, and so when we got married, we went to the Methodist church, and did that for a few years. Joined a church here in town, and boy, the Methodists really lost their way, man. They just, they forgot about the good book. They forgot about right and wrong. I mean, it's like they never wanted to offend anybody, so they never told anybody about morality. They didn't talk about morality. Okay? Now, I like a little fire and brimstone in my preacher. Man, I want him to tell me, hey, if you're not living a good life, you're going to go to hell. If you're not doing the right things, you don't have faith. And for you guys, works, right? If you don't have that, eternity in hell is a really bad thing. Okay? And so the Methodists just kind of moved away. They just ignoring stuff in the Bible. Okay? You can probably figure out what I'm talking about. So I told my wife, I said, I'm not going to give money to this institution anymore. If you want to keep going to church, we're going to find a new church. And she agreed. Okay. So, but while I was there, we did a Bible study every week. We had a group of about 12 to 15 people. We take one book out of the Bible and we would study it and then pick a new book. And we did this for a couple of years. A really nice group of people, some married couples, some singles. And after a while, they said, well, why don't we try something a little different? And somebody mentioned looking at the faith, kind of the founding and the impact of Christianity on our country. And they all looked at me, the government teacher. Okay. And so I went out and tried to find a good book that kind of encapsulates this. And this is Christianity, the Constitution, the faith of the founding fathers. And so we went through this book and looked at each of the founders and the influences on them and so forth. Okay. Now, when Locke talks about property, he actually uses Genesis, okay, where God gave the earth to whom originally? Adam, and then he destroyed it. He gave the earth to whom? Noah. Okay, so he kind of uses that as a biblical perspective of property. Okay, but it goes further than that. When you guys write a paper and you use somebody else's ideas, you cite those ideas, correct? Okay, so did the founders. Okay, and so when we look at the influence of John Locke, the author of this book went back and looked at citations of the founders by decade and who they were citing or what they were citing. Okay, so the Enlightenment thinkers are people like Hobbes and Locke and Rousseau and Montesquieu and Blackstone and others. And then you have people that study law and write about law and so forth, English common law. So if you look at by decade, the most citations of any philosopher by the founding fathers in the 1760s, in the decade leading up to independence, was John Locke. If you look at the 1770s, the most cited thinker was John Locke. Okay, so I want you to take a look. Let me see if I can find it in here. The Declaration of Independence is on page. It's around page 30. Goodness. I know I have it in here. Oh, it's on 30? Okay. All right. So we're just going to look at the first two paragraphs, all right? Actually, we're going to skip the first paragraph for time. You've all heard it before, I think. Okay, but we're going to jump down to the second paragraph on page 30. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator, God, with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, the people. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it, and institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Okay, now, who wrote this? Jefferson. Okay. Did he plagiarize Locke here? Yeah, I don't know if he. there's no citations at the end of the Declaration, you know what I mean? But he definitely borrows from Locke, okay, as did all the founders. Okay, now my regular class, they're going to have to write about that. I'm not going to have you guys write about that. But, yeah, so, guys, listen. If government does not secure these, it's the right of us to overthrow them. Okay? Alter or abolish that government. Now, on November 3rd, we are going to alter our government. Yes? We're going to choose a new president and vice president. We're going to choose new members of Congress, new members of the Senate. In some states, new governors. Certainly city councils, okay, county commissions, state legislatures will all change. They will all be altered. And that's the great thing about this country, is a peaceful transition of power from one administration to another. Okay? Now, originally, there were no term limits in the Constitution. Thank goodness, George Washington, who could have been president for life, could have been king, chose not to be king, and chose to resign after 2 terms, setting a great precedent for this country that that's long enough for one rule. Okay? Not really even a ruler, one president. Okay? So, now, if they start to take away these, if our government becomes destructive of these ends, what is life? You have the right to live and be secure. Okay? You have the right to pursue your own dreams. All of you will choose whether you go to college or not, where you go to college. You will choose what career to study, or how we do this in religion class, your vocation, okay? Whether that's a stay-at-home mom or dad, okay? Or a surgeon, or a garbage collector, or a postwoman, postal worker, okay? What have you, okay? You are free to do that, okay? And these are given to us, these rights are given to us by whom? Again, God. Now, if these rights are given to us by man, we give these rights to ourselves, can they be taken away? If they're given to us from God and they are natural, can they be taken away? Never. Never. Guys, this is a big deal. Because in this country, fewer and fewer people believe in this. People are more and more subjective, moral relativism. If it feels good, it's fine. Yes? Okay. Now, when you have a whole nation of people that lose this, or a majority of people that lose objective truth, or lose God, do you not have a more Hobbesian view when it comes to the necessity of government? Because people will become more combative, more destructive without God. James Madison and other founders spoke to this issue. They said that this Constitution that we wrote for us, that secures these rights, will only work for a moral citizen. It will not work for an immoral population. We can not govern ourselves. We're going to need a strong Leviathan to control us. You look at our government, okay? Anybody watching the news last night? Louisville, Kentucky? Come on, people. There was one police officer officer acquitted in the Breonna Taylor case. Okay. Now, oh shoot. God, I wish we could go on for a couple of hours, but I'll try and pick up there. Okay, with class tomorrow, and I'll talk with them about Rousseau, and you can guys get a kind of kick out of Rousseau there. Okay, but he is important as well, especially when we talk about direct democracy. You guys have a great day.